Hello, and welcome to our little interview with Pastor Allison. Pastor Allison offered to talk with me about some things that we are going to learn more about in our Queer Eye Watch and Chat. And so, Pastor Allison, welcome. I just want to know if you can tell our viewers, who are you, where do you serve, and what has brought you some fun and joy during COVID?
Thanks for inviting me. So my name's Pastor Allison, obviously. Who am I? That's a weird question, but I live in Milwaukee. I love to hike. I have a really cute dog named Sage who's sleeping on the bed behind me. I love my partner, Wendy. I am energized by the Enneagram and exercise and any time when I don't have to sit still, pretty much. So that's kind of where I'm getting life right now, but specifically is hiking with Wendy is really bringing me life, and also ice cream right now. So
yeah. What flavor specifically are you?
Well, right now it's Ben & Jerry's. It's like a mint with Oreo cookies in it.
Yum.
Very refreshing. I forgot to answer where I serve, but I'm a solo pastor at Journey and Faith Church in Mount Pleasant, which is technically Racine.
Cool. So I invited you here because we are learning about Pastor Noah, who is a gay pastor in Philadelphia, and you were so gracious to talk to me and us about your own call process. So there's an organization called Extraordinary Lutheran Ministries that supports LGBTQIA+ candidates for ministry and pastors and deacons and all sorts of rostered people in the ELCA. And according to their website today, there are more than 400 LGBTQIA+ ministry leaders in the ELCA, and LGBTQIA+ ministers often have a difficult journey through the process of candidacy into public ministry, according to Extraordinary Lutheran Ministries. And because you're my friend, I knew that you might have something to add to this conversation. So I wondered if you could talk about your call process and just anything that you are thinking about related to these statistics and assertions from the ELM website.
Yeah, so the call process, I'm going to be super honest, it was hell. Like, it was hell. And mine was a little easier and less, it wasn't as dragged out as other people's, which that should kind of give people a hint that it sucks for us. It sucks for queer people. It sucks for people in the LGBTQ IA+ community. So I graduated seminary in 2017, and I didn't get a call. Like, I started my first call February of 2019. So that was almost 2 full years in the making.
Wow.
Yeah. So my call process specifically, I think I interviewed or like had some type of FaceTime, whether it was like a senior pastor, if it was a associate call. There was like, I think 8 different congregations that I had some type of contact with before I got to the church that I currently serve. And a lot of the things I heard were, you're not experienced enough, which, you know, that could be a euphemism for you look young, because I look young and I can't change that. It could be that you're a female, right? It could be that you're a lesbian. Like, that could mean a lot of things. That's like a really way to say nothing. But there are specifically churches who would not consider not even look at my paperwork or not even be willing to meet me because I'm a lesbian, which, can I swear?
Yeah.
You hesitated. It's crap. I'll say crap. It's crap. That's funny. It sucks. So like, I had some really good conversations with senior pastors, and we connected, we vibed, and I was like, okay, like, I could see this going forward. Only to hear back a couple days later, yeah, the council isn't ready for a gay pastor. What does that mean? You're not ready to meet a human? So I heard that more than once. And another call process with another congregation I was in, they didn't know whether they would let their pastor preside over gay weddings or same-sex weddings, which is kind of a red flag as well. Like you're contemplating calling a lesbian and you don't know if the church is gonna let their pastor preside over a wedding for a same-sex couple. Like there's a disconnect there. And so the call process for me, it was filled with a lot of disappointment and a lot of frustration that clearly churches, there was some issue, right? With my personhood. Like if you can't even bring yourself to read my paperwork because of one little part of my identity, like you've got some stuff you need to work on, right? Like that is just one. So my sexuality is just one aspect of who I am, right? It doesn't really affect how I pastor, and it shouldn't, because I'm a person who brings gifts to ministry, who went to school for this and whatever. So the call process was, it sucked, to be honest. And throughout it, I learned that churches haven't done work or don't know anybody who's queer, or which is not true because they just don't feel safe, right? Opening up to you for whatever reason. But I mean, like, I don't know if straight people have ever had someone not meet them because they're straight, right? I doubt it.
No.
I doubt it, right? So it just became very interesting and disheartening and disappointing that this one aspect of me was such a barrier to people, that you couldn't let me be your pastor, or you couldn't even like strike up a conversation and try to get to know me first. So my whole process was filled with, I'm not experienced enough, which you're calling a first call pastor, so I don't really know what that means. You can see, like, I'm from just like, I graduated seminary, or we won't consider you, or we're not ready for a lesbian pastor. But it just always was interesting to me when I pay attention to who got called where after. It was either a straight person, and most of the time it was a male. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting. So there's a lot of different things compounded in that.
Yeah. I think something that's special about you in listening to you talk about your experience is that you were able to recognize that you are good and beloved, and that the problem is not your identity. The problem is, the messiness of sin, and that congregations were in this space where they hadn't done the work, or they were, not open, or whatever it was, that you were able to recognize that it wasn't necessarily about you and your skills for pastoring. And I think that's cool, and that shows resilience to me. And I'm not sure that every person can experience this kind of thing. And I'm sure there was a lot of desolation as part of it, right? But like, to not take that into yourself and think, oh, they're right about me, right? I don't belong here in the clergy space. That just to me shows a lot of strength in people who can push through this stuff.
Yeah. So can I add on to that?
Yeah.
So yeah, and one of the things my partner asked me, or she admires about me, is the fact that I didn't give up, because she watched me through this. So she was like there with me when I had some of the phone calls, and then I would just cry, right? Because you feel like crap. And it was really hard to not internalize and think there's something wrong with you. And so I hope, churches can learn from that. Like we're people with feelings who have been trained to do this job, to lead people and walk with them in their faith. And like I'm surprised myself that I didn't quit, because it would have been way easier to get a job and have a life and live out a vocation, not in the church, because the church can freely discriminate based on sexuality and gender identity and all the things. So I just wanted to add to that, because it wasn't easy. Like, I would get off the phone and I would be immediately heartbroken and cry, and then I would get mad and be like, no, this is your problem. Like, you have work to do. And I wouldn't be here without Wendy and without some of my really good friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm grateful that we're able to talk about this because it is surprising, not that surprising, but kind of surprising to me that there are not statistics for this situation. So a lot of what we're talking about is anecdotal. So like I graduated from seminary in 2016 in May, and June, I guess. I was ordained in September of that same year, right? By August, I was in a church. And that, right? People might say, oh, that's just, they were just looking for the best candidate. But meanwhile, some of my friends who graduated at the same time into the same church, right, with the same number of openings for first call people, waited way longer than I did, and their sexuality and gender identities were not the same as mine. And so I think it's really disheartening to me that there's not, I love data, right? So I want some data about this.
Yeah,
like,
I want to see this because
what's the average wait time?
right. Yeah. Ooh, I need to make a note about that. I should ask ELM if they've made data for it.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because even wondering about the number of interviews people have for their first call, many people are hoping, you have to have a call to get ordained. So many people are just looking for like a pretty good fit for their first call. We know it might not be the place we stay forever. It might not be the eschaton, right? It's not like a utopian situation. We just need to get ordained and see what it's like to be a pastor. But the number of places a person can interview and whether they feel that if they don't fit, they could remove themselves from the process. I think there's probably a lot of difference when it comes to your gender identity and especially your sexuality and if you're open about that.
Right.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question for you.
Sure.
What do you see as some specific gifts that you bring because of this challenging experience of looking for a call?
So you sort of named it. It's just this, I don't quit. I don't like to give up on anything, right? And so I will fight tooth and nail to prove not only to you, but to because representation matters, right? I grew up with the same male pastor my entire life, and I wondered what my life would be like had I been introduced to a female pastor, right? Or somebody that was been around more people that were queer. Like, how would that have shaped who I am and my journey? But this perseverance and this kind of feistiness that I think I bring. I spent most of my life doing things that are male dominated in general. So like sports, science. Like I had one of my lab professors in college, my chemistry professor, he thought women were stupid. And so I would always answer the questions just to prove him wrong. Because, right, like, yeah, of course, duh, But like, so this like can-do attitude that I think I bring as a pastor, but as a person and just the way I live my life. But, and this sense of, I think it's also given me a willingness to be vulnerable and to share my story, because my congregation didn't know my story. And when I finally shared that with them, I think that allowed them to be more honest about the pains in their church journey or their personal journey. And so, yeah, the perseverance is big, but also that I get it done and it's important. And I think it shows my commitment to what I do and how much I care and love God and people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that perseverance thing so I love the Bible, and it reminded me of Romans 5 that, perseverance leads to eventually to hope, and that hope does not disappoint us. I think that, and then also like Jesus as the pioneer and perfecter of our faith is, and the surrounded by the cloud of witnesses thing, like that reminds me of what you were saying about representation, being able to follow Jesus in the path that's laid out before us because we're not the only ones doing it. So I'm really grateful that you are a minister in the church and you're an ordained person, and that like you occupy the space that you occupy and people can see you and know you and follow Jesus alongside you, and then learn like, oh, it's not scary to have a person who isn't straight in the pulpit. It's actually really awesome. Look at all the perspectives that she brings.
Right.
So the last question I have for you is, as you consider the ELCA and your experience and your infinite wisdom. um, what is one thing that you think congregations can work on related specifically to welcoming and being open to clergy of LGBTQIA+ identities?
Yeah. So I'm going to say more than one. You know this.
Okay.
I think the first thing is clergy specific is education. I think people are so scared of what they don't know and what they don't understand. And a first safe step, even though I think it's dumb that we have to be so cautious around meeting people, but the first safe, most comfortable step is education. So learning what all the letters in LGBTQIA+ mean, talking about gender and sexuality being a spectrum, because it's not we've created this box, and this is what it means to be male, and this is what it means to be female, and we've drawn these lines around these boxes, and it's just not that clean cut, right? The boxes are created, this isn't an ordained box that this is the way people have to be. No, this is something we've created as a society and as a culture, and the more we realize that right, women used to not be able to wear pants, and here we are, women can wear pants, oh dear God, right? So just a simple education. But then the next would come, I think what's important is also doing some work with the clobber verses that people throw at people like me and at queer folks to say, we're sinful, we're wrong, there's something wrong with us, you're going to hell, you don't belong here. So doing some education on the clobber verses in the Bible is important. But just being around people who aren't like you,
Yeah.
It's, I think about my home church, and once they all found out that I'm not straight, I think because I was already beloved to them, I think that made it easier for the people who I think had really strict views about it before. And it sucks that you have to know somebody to right, not hate gay people. But if that's what it takes, then whatever, fine. And so I think being around, have a cup of coffee with people who are not like you, who are not straight or cis. But I think the biggest thing too is this movement from more than tolerating us as your clergy. I hate the word tolerance. I think it's dumb, and I think it's stupid, and I think it allows discrimination and hate to still exist. Mm-hmm. So, and I told you this when I spoke with you, I think it was last week, but that in my congregation, I'm fairly certain there are people who are still uncomfortable with my sexuality, because those are the people that don't ask about Wendy, and who don't, who kind of ignore that part of my personhood. I know they like me as their pastor, but they're never gonna ask about my spouse the way they're going to ask about your spouse, right? Yeah. The way they actually are going to ask how Matt's doing. Where's Matt? Why can't I see him? And so, and they welcome me, but they just tolerate me, right? They're not celebrating my full personhood as their pastor. They're celebrating me as their pastor, but they can pretend that I'm straight if they don't ask about it. So getting to a place where you value the entire person and celebrate the entire person, and we just want to be treated like people, like you would treat anybody else. You ask about their family and their spouse, and you because people do that to straight people all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's my list. That's my short list.
Thank you, Pastor Allison. Thank you for having this conversation. I think you're great, and I know that God thinks you're great. So thank you for talking to me and sharing your story with us. It is not always easy to be vulnerable, at least for me, it's not always easy. And so I always really admire other people when they can do that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Adios.
See ya.